Hey guys, I'm giving you a recording. This recording is probably a pretty important one because it's to help you get started thinking about how you're going to be responding to poetry. I know that no matter how many times I tell you all to not be afraid of poetry, and no matter how positive I am with you about the art form and how much I try to demystify it, um, some of you are still going to be afraid of it, and that will manifest itself in a couple of ways. One is, a resistance to writing it, but you have to. And the other is workshop. 360 workshops for poetry tend to be very, very quiet. And that's because people feel like they don't know how to respond to it. A couple of things that, first of all, you should really start preparing for these workshops by sitting down and giving a really good read to Walt Macdonald's Advice I Wish I'd Been Told. It's available right on the schedule. You just need to click on it. I'm going to go through some of the most important elements of it, but really you can't just skip the reading of this one. It's really important. But I'm just going to share you a whiteboard here that has some of the most important points that he tries to make. Hopefully this will work. There we go. So there are three, he separates his piece into three parts. He says, resist abstractions. He says that vivid images are the key to freedom. And then he goes on to this section called the Elephant's Graveyard, which is a catch-all. And it has more to do with the ethos behind poetry. But it really is, it simplifies, poetry down to some really basic elements here that I think you ought to take into account. In fiction, we often say show, don't tell. And in nonfiction, we say show and tell, as long as the thinking is about something that you're looking at. When we talk about resisting abstractions in poetry, we're really trying to resist, we're talking about resisting phrases that are sort of empty, well-worn, cliched, or just generally word packages. Remember, the primary point of a poem is to make something new, and oftentimes making something strange. And in fact, one of the phrases I've heard people use, one of the terms some poets use, is actually strangification, which isn't really a word. It sounds like something someone would make up, and it is. But it's this idea of trying to take something that we're used to seeing, and then trying to make it new enough for people, to make them see it with new eyes. You can't do that with prepackaged language, and you certainly can't do it with abstraction. So what is an abstraction? An abstraction does not mean, we tend to think of abstract equals obscure. Abstraction is not, an abstraction is not something you can't understand. In fact, sometimes it's pretty clear. If I were to say, well, it's a beautiful day outside, that's not difficult to understand what I'm saying, but it is very abstract because I'm not indicating to you, I'm not evoking that day in any way that you can see. My idea of a beautiful day could be completely different from yours. And so I really haven't given you a window into the experience at all. Maybe my idea of a beautiful day is snow on the ground with bright sun. Or maybe my idea of a beautiful day is the heat of summer, about 85 degrees, and the whole world clouded with haze and mist. It really does depend on your point of view. A beautiful place could be a holler in the backwoods of West Virginia, or it could be the plains of Wyoming. And even the hollers of West Virginia is not specific or precise enough. So avoid abstractions. Really be conscious and hold your feet to the fire to not tell me about something, but to evoke it. Not to try to make your reader feel something by telling them what to feel, but trying to guide them to what you want them to feel through your images and through your sensory elements. This leads us to the next thing. Vivid images are the key to freedom. And this is he's actually quoting Yeats here, who said that he uses images because he respects the freedom of the reader. And it's not just that images are important in a poem, it's that poets covet them, and they develop them, and they reach after them, and they search them out. They're always paying attention. And images are not just what you see, it's what you touch, it's what you taste, it's what you physically feel, it's what you hear, what you smell. All of these things are images. And they need, I mean, in a really good poem, many of those senses are invoked. So you want to make sure that your poem is rich with what I call the stuff of life. It is not actually essential that every single image or sensation in a poem is metaphorical or symbolic. Sometimes it may just be helping to create the atmospheric elements of the poem or the tone of the poem. But without imagery, it is very difficult to write a good poem. There are some interesting abstract poems out there, but they really need, you need absolutely to have imagery. And that carries forward not only to static imagery, but actually imagery that moves. So representative actions when a character moves, being able to identify and to call forth what that movement looks like. A body moving underneath its clothing, for example, or the particular way a person walks, a strut or a swagger. But even that is not enough, so you might want to try simile strutting like something else. So really try to evoke. I'm never going to punish you for loading up your poems with images. So, and that's easy. One of the jobs of a poet, and I've often been told I kind of do this in my poems, is to just point things out to people. Every time I say, look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this, implied in that is an argument of value. I'm telling you that's important. And the more things you can claim as being important in the world, the more richer poetry becomes, and also the more, you guys like to use the word relatable or accessible the poem is to everyone who's reading it. The Elephant's Graveyard has more to do with ethos, how you should be approaching a poem and poetry and the writing of poetry. So if we're thinking about workshop, by the way, two things that you can definitely look for. Look for abstractions and how they may be made, turned into something more interesting, more inventive, more unique, and more vivid and evocative, all right? Look for images. Always suggest more imagery. Look for places where the writer could have included more imagery, could have shown you more, could have relayed more, could have delivered more. Along those lines, look for opportunities that the writer had to drift off of their imagery and metaphor, to linger on a simile, to follow the rabbit down the rabbit hole a little bit. Don't just tell me that the sky was like a canvas of cerulean blue. That just came into my head. Tell me, you come up with canvas. Okay, so the next line should be about painting the sky, or brushstrokes, or palette knives, or oils, or watercolors. And there certainly should be colors. So follow the metaphor, follow the simile, follow the imagery where it leads, and don't worry so much about yanking the poem back to where you originally intended to go. Play with it. Take joy in the language. Take joy in the opportunities that are there. And as readers, constantly be pointing out to the person what those opportunities are and where they might come. So this also means avoid sin in easy pleasures, which is what Macdonald's coming at after, like sloth. Don't be lazy in a poem. Greed. Don't be too desiring of affirmation. Worry about your reader. You should be worried about that ideal reader, but don't necessarily be always worried about pleasing the reader. Envy. Envy can be interesting. He warns against envy, but he means being envious of other people's awards. And this is more for later on in your writing life, when people start winning Myers Awards and you didn't. I had a student recently that never won or placed in a single award. I nominated him for everything because I thought he was good, but every single awards over a 2-year period, 3-year period, he didn't place. He didn't get any recognition at all. Ended up getting accepted into graduate programs at Syracuse and University of Central Florida, which are two very, very difficult MFA programs to get into. Um, you know, sometimes it takes a while for someone to see what you're doing. So trust what you're doing and follow your arrow, as they say, and don't worry about envy, and also avoid flattery. Both the flattery someone wants to give you, mistrust it. Most of the time, when someone flatters you, they want something. Um, so think about that and be conscious of that, but also avoid flattering others. You're hearing my dog in the background, and I'm not going to re-record this, so you're just going to have to listen past it. But you know, look, you're not helping anybody by just telling them that everything they did is great. Um, Offer concrete and specific advice that will help them to develop what they're doing. Finally, poems, especially formal poems, must follow all the rules of good writing. English professors don't dislike formal poetry. We teach it all the time. We dislike lazy poetry that justifies itself through rhyme. And we've almost become suspicious of form at some level. Not because form is bad. Rachel Reinhardt teaches her courses almost exclusively through form, but because sometimes students get the idea that if they go da-dum 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 da-dum, and they rhyme every couplet, they therefore have a good poem, regardless if there's anything actually there. Poems, especially formal poems, must follow all the rules of good writing. That means that if there's a narrative, it needs to be fully developed. Characters need to be fully developed and evoked. Scenes need to be fleshed out. Language needs to be charged. And it must be absolutely devoid of anything that reeks of cliche. All right, so I wanted to look now at a poem that I think does all of these things in abundance. The poem is called Oranges. It's by Gary Soto. It's a beautiful little narrative poem where it follows all of the good rules of good writing. So I'm going to read it out loud first, and then we're going to talk a little bit about it, or I'm going to lecture to you a little bit about it. Oranges by Gary Soto. The first time I walked with a girl, I was 12, cold and weighted down with 2 oranges in my jacket. December, the frost cracking beneath my steps, my breath before me, then gone. As I walked toward her house, the one whose porch light burned yellow night and day in any weather, a dog barked at me until she came out, pulling at her gloves, face bright with rouge. I smiled, touched her shoulder, and led her down the street, across a used car lot and a line of newly painted trees, until we were breathing before a drugstore. We entered, the tiny bell bringing a saleslady down a narrow aisle of goods. I turned to the candies, tiered like bleachers, and asked what she wanted. Light in her eyes, a smile starting at the corners of her mouth. I fingered a nickel in my pocket, and when she lifted a chocolate that cost a dime, I didn't say anything. I took the nickel from my pocket, then an orange, and set them quietly on the counter. When I looked up, the lady's eyes met mine, and held them, knowing very well what it was all about. Outside, a few cars hissing past, fog hanging like old coats between the trees. I took my girl's hand in mine for 2 blocks, then released it to let her unwrap the chocolate. I peeled my orange that was so bright against the gray of December that, from some distance, someone might have thought I was making a fire in my hands. Now, that is beautiful. It defies analysis, which is probably why many of you have never encountered it before. I mean, what is this poem about? Well, it's about a little boy who buys his girlfriend a chocolate with a nickel and an orange. And of course, it's much more than that. The 2 oranges are bright as the sun in this poem, and they represent the gift of love, sacrifice, and pleasure. And if you read this poem, you'll notice amazing things happening in every line. Great enjambment on the line breaks. It is full and flush with detail and the stuff of life. It almost reads like an essay the way it begins. The first time I walked with a girl, I was 12, cold and weighted down with 2 oranges in my jacket. But even that is surprising. The first 2 lines are unsurprising, but cold and weighted down with 2 oranges in my jacket is surprising. One can easily see that originally he had planned to give one of the oranges to the girl, but she wanted chocolate, so he bought the chocolate with an orange. It's kind of brilliant. But look at all the brilliant details: the rouge on the cheeks, the barking dog, like the one you heard in the background, the light touch on the shoulder, um, the the uh, the candies tiered like bleachers. Um, it is so intimate and private, and it's a gift to you. And at no point can you say, "Well, I left," Soto left that open so the reader could imagine what was going on in it. If anybody says that, I'm just going to mute you on Workshop. You're just going to get muted. It is if that worked, the greatest poem in the history of the English language would be, and that's it. It would be emptiness. You don't. Gaps are important in writing. That's where the leaps come from. But the gaps and the leaps aren't about not being generous with imagery, not giving enough for the reader to see, feel, hear, touch, taste, and smell. The gaps are there. The gaps that are being left are the explanatory ones. We notice we never get to know what this boy was feeling. We never get inside his head. We never get to know what the little girl is feeling except through body language. We don't get to know what happens afterwards. We don't know why this little boy loves this girl. We just get this one moment of the narrative that has to stand for all of it and tell us, ultimately this is a poem about love, and it tells us everything you need to know about love from when you're 7 to the day you die. It's all right there in the poem. All of those abstractions, all of those ideas are present, but they are present through the stuff of life, through the imagery and the sounds and the music of the poem. Trust it. Like I said, images are the way to freedom. And if you were to respond to this poem, you can very well say you want more of this, you want less of that, but maybe not this poem. Maybe there really isn't much more you could possibly want from a poem like this. But always insist on the stuff of life, insist on more imagery, insist on the drift, insist on good writing, and never accept laziness in a peer's work or your own. And if you do all of that, our workshops in poetry should be exciting and engaging and quite a bit of fun. Well, that's all I have for you today. I hope this is helpful to you, and I look forward to talking to you all very soon.